welcome to Little Rock Planning Commission. Staff will call the roll.
Chairman LaTour,
Here.
Vice Chair Stebbins, Commissioner Berry,
Here.
Commissioner Brock, Commissioner Bynum, Commissioner Hamilton,
Here.
Commissioner Haynes,
Here.
Commissioner Rahman,
Here.
Commissioner Thomas,
Here.
Commissioner Vogel, and one open position. You do have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. You've been given a copy of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
If you're in favor of the minutes, please say you raise your right hand. Opposed? Thank you. Mr. Carney, if you'll go through the consent agenda, and by my records, item A, B, and 3 remain on regular.
You have no other cards?
Sir?
You have no other cards?
No other cards.
Okay. Consent agenda, September 12, 2019, meeting of the Little Rock Planning Commission consists of the following items. We have one item on for consent deferral. That's item 1, file Z9449, rezoning from R2 to C3, located at the northeast corner of Lawson Road and Beecham Road. Staff recommends this application be deferred to the October 24th, 2019 agenda as the applicant failed to complete the required notification to surrounding property owners. On consent approval are the following items. Item 2, file LU, let me lose this. File LU 19-1601, a land use plan amendment in the Otter Creek Planning District at 1010 Stagecoach Road from neighborhood commercial to commercial. Staff believes this change is appropriate. Item 2.1, file Z9450, rezoning from R2 to C3 located at 1010 Stagecoach Road. Staff recommends approval of the requested C3 zoning. Item number 4, file Z9257-A, the Village at the Gateway Solar Farm conditional use permit located west of Vimy Ridge Road, north of Pleasant Hill Road. Staff recommends approval of the requested conditional use permit subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in sections 4, 5, and 6 and the staff analysis in this agenda staff report. Item number 5, file Z9277-A, 1224 Aldersgate Multifamily, revised conditional use permit, located at 1224 Aldersgate Road. Staff recommends approval of the revised conditional use permit, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in sections 4, 5, and 6, and the staff analysis in this agenda staff report. Staff recommends approval of the variance to allow a slight encroachment into the 30-foot interstate buffer. A variance will also be required from the City Beautiful Commission. Item number 6, file Z9446, Lambert Duplex conditional use permit located at 4121, 4123 B Street. Staff recommends approval of the requested conditional use permit and parking variance, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in sections 5 and 6 of the agenda staff report. Item number 7, file Z9451, Brewster multi-sectional manufactured home conditional use permit located on the north side of Woodrow Street between Franklin and Riffle Streets in the College Station community. Staff recommends approval of the requested conditional use permit, subject to compliance with the following conditions. First being compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in sections 5 and 6 of the agenda staff report, compliance with the siting criteria as found in section 36255D5 of the code. A concrete apron is required for the proposed driveway with a maximum width of 20 feet, running from the edge of pavement of Woodrow Street to the front property line. The gravel driveway and parking pad must be bordered with permanent materials such as landscape timbers or metal edging. And that concludes the presentation of the consent agenda.
Okay, you've heard the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Chairman LaTour, I move that we approve the consent agenda as read, including any deferrals or changes.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. If you agree, raise your hand. Those opposed? If your project or name were in that group, you're welcome to stay and watch us do this, or you're equally welcome to not stay. So have a good day.
They never say.
As a note of explanation on the following items, and I'd like staff to give me a little help on item A. But for all three of the items that are on regular agenda, we have a rule that if we have less than 8 commissioners, which we do today, you have the right to defer. And the second part of, we still have less than 8. And the second part of that is I would just note that item A is on there, to my knowledge, not because of an objection, but because one of the commissioners has requested a conversation about it. So I guess, should we do item A first?
Yes.
If you'll read item A, and then we'll ask about deferral.
Item A, File Z9423, Second and Louisiana Commercial Parking Lot Conditional Use Permit located at 200 South Louisiana Street. Conditional use permit is requested to allow for development of a commercial parking lot on the UU zone property at 200 South Louisiana Street. Staff recommends approval of the requested CUP, including a buffer variance and a waiver of right-of-way dedication for West 2nd Street, subject to the following conditions. First, being compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in sections 4, 5, and 6 of the agenda staff report. Any handicapped parking spaces on the site must have an accessible route to the sidewalks as per ordinance and ADA standards. The site will be limited to the signage shown on the proposed site plan. All signage must be located at least 5 feet back from the property lines, and any site lighting must be low level, shielded, and directed into the site.
Again, a little staff guidance. Would the questioning take place now or after the deferral decision is made?
Well, I think we need to ask the applicant if he wishes to go forward before we go any farther in
The applicant
discussion.
here for this project.
Hello, Thomas Pownell with Thomas Engineering. I guess I'd like to know the question that is being posed to us.
Let me call it Commissioner Berry, and
Yeah.
he'll do it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, and I'll take responsibility for pulling this off on regular agenda. And thanks for the chair for indulging me that privilege which I have not exercised in 5 years. There are no technical issues on site with this. The questions I have for you are several. You have not got a CUP approval, but you've already torn the buildings down. I drove by there today. You had excavation people on there working on the parking lot. So you kind of step me through the process you have. The sequence, it just seems to be a little premature when you implode a big section of downtown without the approval of a parking lot, which you have the right to do, to demolish, but the spirit of that just seems a little perpendicular.
Okay, I understand the question. I wasn't too terribly involved in the demolition planning. I was asked to prepare it after the buildings were demolished. I've got my client here, I may ask him that, but it was bought for this purpose, for a parking lot. It may be premature, but that's what we're still wanting to move forward with it. We'd like to get approval, but we're just trying to stay ahead of the game.
I understand that. Could I ask for the Stevens exactly, do they have estimate of the number of employees that need parking extra beyond what the parking they provide in the parking decks? Did they provide any estimates of that?
I haven't been privy to that. I was told to make as many parking spots as possible.
You're entitled.
Mhm.
And all those parking spots will be for Stevens, or some will be commercially available?
Right now, they are all for Stevens. However, I think this conditional use permit does allow us to commercially rent or make commercially available. But right now, the plan is just for Stevens.
So that has not been determined yet, pending whether or not, if they know it's going to be fully utilized by Stevens.
Right.
You know, we are a planning commission, and appreciate staff. I was here during subdivision when this went through, and it was fine all technically. But, you know, creating a sea of parking in downtown is in a block, at least a half a block like that, is different than when you're in the suburbs and you have green fields and you don't have surrounding built environment like you do downtown. And I don't think anyone is, it's a mystery, anyone that where you have parking decks and parking lots. Downtown you have dead space. There's no street activity. There's no level of interest. No one hangs out and chats around a dark parking lot at nighttime. And I know the convenience and expedience of that. I'm very concerned that not much care and forethought has been brought into this. We have right now, if you look at the empty parking spots, surface and parking decks, 100 and 200 blocks of Scott and Main, we're starting that on Louisiana. And to me, I would think that you're cannibalizing the principle of our downtown. That's not what we're supposed to be doing downtown. I understand the need for parking. It just seemed kind of precipitous that a large institutional employer would not have a conversation about what is the public interest for negotiating this in downtown. So, you know, I'm not for this. I'm not going to support it, as you can tell. And you can end up deferring, and we can talk about this again at the next meeting. You're the engineer. This is not an engineering issue.
Right, it's not a technical issue, but it's a use issue, I guess you could say, which is really what you rule on.
And
I
the
understand that.
externalities of this are very significant. This is not a suburban parking lot.
Right. I understand that. What I'm debating on the deferral and whether or not to go forward with the vote is, may I have a moment, if that's all right? Thank you. Are there any other commissioners have any questions for us about this, actually? May
Maybe
have
I
any
can.
comments?
Yeah, maybe I can help you a little bit.
Okay.
I've lived in Little Rock. I grew up in Little Rock, and have called this a home for a very long time. My mother actually operated a restaurant in the building.
Chairman, if I may step in for a minute. I mean, essentially, we need to have the decision before the discussion and going to the vote, because
Certainly.
Well, he asked for questions.
I understand.
He opened
I'm
that up. He
I'm
should
trying
have
to say
made
as
the
staff
decision.
that if we're going to make a decision to defer, we need to make a decision to defer before we have discussions about an item and we move on with the item.
May I indulge the chair that Commissioner Ramon may be able to finish his comments since the applicant opened up the floor for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Berry.
I'm sorry, what's the,
You done?
I'll make it short.
Thank you.
I don't foresee myself supporting this either, absent some really good explanations. So if that helps you in your decision-making process, then.
That does. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So it gets down to what's your pleasure?
May I have one moment, please? Thank you.
Isn't this the only reason you have to come before us?
If I may ask Director Collins, if they vote on this and it's denied, what recourse and how long will we have to wait for another vote or judgment? Can I get some clarification on that? Or someone in staff?
Well, your appeal would be, on any CUP would be to the board,
Okay.
for that. So the appeal process would be filed at the clerk's office. When is the next cycle? I'd have to look and see that. Or the other alternative is, if non-appealed, then it's the year to bring back forth.
I was making sure I was correct with the year. That's what I want to make sure of. Given that, in the light of your comments, we would request a deferral.
Defer?
Yes, please.
All right, there's a request to defer. Would there be a motion be to accept that request?
I move that we approve the motion to defer the request.
And seconded. All in favor of granting the deferral request? Those opposed?
That would be deferred to October 24th.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Item B. Pardon me. Item B, Mr. Carney, if you'd read the record.
Mr. Chairman, can we have the applicant come forward and let us know if he wishes to go forward today or
Sure.
defer?
As you see, once again, we have less than 8 if you'd like to defer.
You know what? We're going to go ahead and go. I'd like to go ahead and go. I'd like
I
to.
can barely hear up there.
I would like to proceed. Let's proceed.
You'd like to proceed. Okay, with that, there was an error in the notification process. They're supposed to have been sent out certified. They were not. They were sent out regular. That is, can be fixed with a waiver of the bylaws. So to allow them to proceed, would there be a motion to waive the bylaws?
I move that we waive the bylaws
there
regarding
a
the
second?
certified mail.
I'll second.
Those in favor of the waiver to allow proceeding, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Thank you, Mr. Carney.
Mr. Chairman, as this has not yet been heard by the Planning Commission, this will be your first hearing of the item, which you may wish to explain the timing of a first hearing as far as what each side gets for presentation.
You mean the 20 minutes? Each side, we have one card in opposition. We have 3 or 4 cards in favor. He will read it. He will read the project into the record, and each side will have up to 20 minutes to state their case for or against. You will have the option of going first if you want, or if you want to hear the opponent, you can let him go first. But you'll have that decision in just a second, and Mr. Carney will read it into the record.
If I make the decision to let him go first,
I can't hear
if
what
I make the decision to let him go first, in what order
Okay,
would
in a
our
minute.
people come up?
Good deal.
Let me
No,
do
no.
the presentation first.
I'm sorry.
Item B, File Z 3451-D, Bennett Davis Group, revised short form POD located at 1300 North Shackelford. This building and property were previously occupied by a church and daycare. In late 2015, the property was rezoned to POD to allow for use of the building for a printing, copying, and graphic design business. 03 General Office District permitted uses were also approved as alternative uses. Hours of activity were approved as 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. No alternative operating hours were approved for any of the alternative uses. In 2018, the applicant entered into an agreement with various dance associations to allow them to use the former sanctuary space as a dance facility. They had previously been meeting in the Best Chisholm facility on West 12th Street. The sanctuary area has been converted into a competition-level ballroom dance floor and reception area. The space represents approximately 4,500 square feet of the building. On November 1st, 2018, the Planning Commission approved the applicant's request to withdraw a PCD request to add an event center to the allowed uses. The applicant is now requesting a revision to the approved POD zoning to allow for use of the former sanctuary space as an event center. Hours of the operation were initially proposed as 7 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week. No in-house alcohol sales are available. Guests desiring to serve alcohol at their event must gain prior approval from the venue staff. The venue is a tobacco-free venue. All catering is open vendor and is the responsibility of the host clientele. The site contains paved parking for approximately 75 vehicles. The applicant is proposing to utilize some unpaved areas off of the paved parking lot for overflow parking. Subsequent to the initial filing of the application, the applicant did modify the hours of operation to be Sunday to Thursday, 8 a.m. to 10:30 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 11:30, with extended hours on New Year's Eve. The applicant has, through the several months that we've dealt with this, attempted to address several of the issues that have been raised of concern by staff. We, however, are not able to recommend approval of or to support an event center that is directly adjacent to or across the street from single-family and two-family residential. As such, staff does not recommend approval. We do recommend denial of this item.
Thank you. 20 minutes. Now
I'll
you have
defer.
2 other cards
I'll have
beside you that are for.
besides me for the 4, so I can defer for those against, correct? I would like to do that.
You have Richard Davis.
I'd like to defer to those who are against. Can I not do that? Can
I
I?
thought you wanted to present it first.
No.
Yeah, okay, fine. Opposing it, we have Jeff Jones.
Hi, my name is Jeff Jones, and I live at 1204 North Shackelford Road. I am opposed to this rezoning for several different reasons. The first of all is that I believe it will negatively impact the property values of my house and my neighbors, all of which have been there for a long time. There isn't anybody that wants to live right next door to a busy parking lot that's got cars coming in and out of it all day and all night. And, you know, the people that are using it now for the dance facility, when I first saw the advertisements for the dance facility, I went to their websites and kind of looked it up, and they seem like, you know, very nice people, and I think that they try and be respectful when they're going in and out of there. But the fact of the matter is, you know, one of the houses is not from here to the door away from that parking lot. And the houses across the street are just across Shackelford Road. So, you know, the activity and the noise involved in, you know, 50, 60, 70 cars, however many people are there for any particular event they've got going on, you know, is a noise level that's unacceptable when you're trying to relax in your home after a long day at work. And, you know, people pull in, they pull out, they get out of the car, they shut the door, they get back in the car, they shut the door, they set their car alarm, so on and so forth. So it's a noise factor that to me is totally inappropriate for, you know, being right next to a residential neighborhood like that. The building is also being used as a mechanical contracting facility currently. Mr. Bennett says it's a temporary scenario for that, but you know, that generates a lot of noise too. It comes through during the day too. So it's not only the evening hours that are kind of being disrupted right now, but the day hours as well. The firewood holding facility that's there as part of his firewood business seems to be kind of getting resolved slowly but surely and more organized. But you know, for a while it was a real mess. Like I say, it seems to be some improvements being made in that area. So those are the reasons that I've been opposed to this from the start, and have met with Mr. Bennett and have met with Mr. Carney and some of my neighbors and so on and so forth. To expand upon what's going on there already, which near as I can tell really shouldn't be, is is, when I first got the application, I couldn't believe that it was something that could even be considered, to serve alcohol to 150 people or more in an unregulated environment is just a bad idea, even in a commercial part of town, much less right next to residential housing. So anyhow, I'm glad to hear that the staff has recommended that it be disapproved, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Davis.
I would like to start by notifying you that the man who just spoke owns the Looney Bin, which is another commercial venture, and I'll leave it at that. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Richard Davis, and I'm here to present a brief history of the Little Rock Bot Club, the Ballroom Latin Swing Social Dance Association, and the Little Rock Country Dancers in particular, and the local dance community in general, and how we came to be involved. The Little Rock Bop Club is fully incorporated with the Office of the Secretary of State and is classified as a 501c7 nonprofit. The club recently celebrated its 27th birthday. The Ballroom Latin and Swing Dance Association is a 501c3 nonprofit and is in its 25th year of operation. The Little Rock Country Dancers have been a functioning dance club since 1984. All three clubs were multi-decade tenants of the former Best Chisholm Y. In February of 2018, CareLink informed us that the building was being sold, and we had a final date of June 30th, 2018 to find another space. After a period of contractual negotiations, we signed a mutually agreeable and beneficial 10-year lease with the Bennett Davis Group for the space occupied by Sir Speedy Printing on April 19th, 2018. A contingency of our lease required that we build and furnish an upscale ballroom, which we have done. We held our first dance there on August 22nd, 2018. While we proudly claim multiple members who are in their 90s and can still dance the socks off most of us, I take this moment to introduce you to 94-year-old Mr. Jack Murphy. Mr. Murphy retired from a stellar 35-year career in this building. He spent his career as city finance director, and on 3 occasions was interim city director. Upon his retirement, he was asked to move to Little Rock City Port, to the Little Rock Port Authority, where he served as port director and other positions for 7 years. Upon that, he was asked to move to MIMS as director, and he is still on an active member of their board. Moving to the other end of the spectrum, I would like to introduce you to 30-year-old Kristen Bird. Birdie is a graphic designer with the Little Rock Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau. She's one of our younger members. She's the youngest we have present today, I think. I may be wrong, but she's 30. We are doctors, lawyers, teachers, carpenters, plumbers, local business people, etc. We're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, and others. We are a microcosm of this community, and we're all inclusive. The ballroom on Shackelford is, I think, the nicest dance facility in the state. Our primary goal is to further the cultural aspects of dance. It is important to give ballroom, East Coast swing, West Coast swing, square dance, country, and other styles of dance a dedicated space to be nurtured and grow. Often our guests come as groups from the local high schools and homeschool situations. Students from colleges such as UALR, Harding, UCA, Hendrix, Henderson, and Washita often come on weekends, holidays, and summer periods to a place where they find a safe, clean, tobacco-free, and welcoming environment. This brings us to where we are now. A quality ballroom facility is a living organism. It requires attention as well as effort to maintain it at the high level we present and demand. And I can assure you, this group of people sitting behind me demands a high level in that ballroom. The Bennett Davis Group and our fastidious members mean that ballroom is in good hands now as well as the future. I reiterate, we have a 10-year lease. The project is undergoing, it is an ongoing undertaking that's been initiated via the triage system. There are still both cosmetic and structural things left to do. External building beautification, signage, and landscaping top our to-do list. However, we find ourselves in the catch-22 situation, in that we cannot proceed to create a premium quality establishment without the monies generated by subleasing the building for events. We plead, ladies and gentlemen, there are only 7 of you. We need 6 of you. We plead that we be granted the facility rezoning we're seeking by your positive vote today, so we can establish ourselves as a good neighbor, become a member of the West Village Consortium, and a lasting business. We're in this for the long haul. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Robert Walker.
Thank you. I'm Robert Walker, member of the Capitol View Stiff Station Neighborhood Association on the City Beautiful Commission, and I was dancing when the Best Chisholm YWCA was operating. Now we have to go out to Shackelford. The gentleman complained about car doors opening and slamming. We play loud music and he hasn't said a word about that. That shows that we keep it quiet. The one rule there, besides work, be appropriate, is no red wine on that red oak floor that I helped to build. We're going to look after that. We're going to try to be nice. If you want us to, I guess we could measure the sound levels, because there really is not a lot of sound. The fire department's next door. Shackelford is real easy to access from Rodney Perham. That's how we get there. We don't go through the residences. I have a whole lot more noise from the freeway, which is 5 blocks away from me from 630, than he's ever going to experience from us. I don't know what else to say. This is one of the few places where couples can dance. Couple dancing, then the line dancing, 1 or 2, and that's it. We try to make it really, really nice, and y'all are welcome to come. We have a big fan and good air conditioning, and we will teach you how to dance. If y'all had any questions, we could answer them. There's no noise. No questions?
Thank you. Michael?
Hey, so, great people. I was listening to Commissioner Ramon talk about, I've lived in this city for 30 years. I moved here in '87. When I graduated from Wichita State with a degree in graphic design, one of my big goals was to get back closer to family and friends, and I wanted to start my own business. I wanted to be a successful businessman, and I'm on my way to do that. The reason I bring that up, though, is because I've driven past the building I currently own for the last 30 years. My wife, Renee, is in the front row. We got married about 2 blocks from this building. So I watched that building. I actually worked for the guy who was part of the church that built it originally. And so I've watched that building go up. I watched it being used, and I watched it start falling apart. I've had it for 3 years. When I bought it, in the sanctuary section of that building, there were 55-gallon trash cans that catch all the water. We actually looked at it 3 years prior. I'm keeping track of my time. Here we go. 3 years prior to me buying it, but couldn't figure out a way to do it. When I finally did buy it, we went in and just gutted it, and there was so much rat crap and squirrels and everything you could think of was inside that building. Had at least one, and I'm not against homeless people, but we had at least one homeless guy living out in the back, and the building had been broken into several times. In 3 years, I'm listening to what Mr. Jones was talking about, negative impact to property values. I know what my property value that I had to pay taxes on was 2 years ago, and it was based at $850,000. At this point, about 3 weeks ago, earlier this year, this summer, it went up 213%. Pulaski County says that my property values have gone from $850 to $1.25 million. Property values are increasing, and at a rapid rate, and we're just getting started. Used to be, you'd be scared to walk through that parking lot because it was very dark and ominous. We've installed security lighting. So the place is starting to come around, and it's a beautiful place. I run my business, which is a printing and graphic design business, out of the back of this building. We use approximately 3,500 square feet when we got this tenant to allow them to dance. When I'm working in the back of my building, when they're having a dance, I can't hear the music. I absolutely can't. I can hear it when I leave to go to my car, and I walk right by the window and the door where that faces it. But if I walk to the end of the parking lot, I can't hear anything. My biggest worry when we started was the fire department, which is, and I've measured it, from my bed to my building to their bedroom windows is 84 feet, 6 inches. I was worried about them. And so I've been over there a number of times trying to be a good neighbor. They've been a great neighbor. Ask them multiple times, how we doing? Here's their comment from the firemen in the fire station. If we didn't see any cars in your lot, we wouldn't know anybody was there. We absolutely wouldn't know anybody was there. So the noise is not an issue. The map behind you, I've actually created some maps here where I actually measured the distance from the edge of my building, not property line, because I own 5 acres, right? I own 5 acres. So the little bit of firewood that we've moved from our Colonel Glenn location to actually store for a moment, it's a forest. It's a woods on my 5 acres. It's not out of the ordinary to see some wood next to a bunch of woods. And when I heard about Mr. Jones's worries about that, I invited him over and I said, listen, I don't want to be an eyesore to anybody here. We'll move that. And we're in the process, as he correctly identified, we're in the process of moving that all the way out of sight so that it won't be an issue. The mechanical contractor business he says is going on is a good friend of mine named Mike Love. He owns Burt Black Service Companies. They had a warehouse burned down in Maumelle. Mike knew that I had about 1,000 square feet in my basement. Can I move some glass? Can I move some of our supplies till we get our new facility built? I said, yes. How long will you be here? Tops, 1.5 years, 2 years. We're coming up on the end of that. We've got about another 8 months with him and he'll be out. He doesn't operate a mechanical service company out of the building. He stores glass, and they may make a little bit of modification, but their trucks are on the road. They're at your houses, fixing your houses on site. It's not a mechanical operation business. As far as the several hundred people drinking, we have no desire to get an alcohol permit. We don't. So far, I don't rent it out as an event facility. What's happened, and the reason we're here today, I guess I got a clock here. The reason we're here today is we've had people come in from out of state, and local people come to this facility and see how beautiful it is. The next obvious question is, hey, listen, I've got a wedding reception. Would we be able to use your facility? Or we've even had, I just found out, we've had some of the universities say, listen, you've got a great facility big enough to host some of our seminars. Could we come and actually sit in your building and do a seminar? See, the word event center, when that gets thrown around, I mean, that can be bad stuff. I'm not on Asher Avenue. I'm not in downtown. I'm not out somewhere where we're going to have a lot of carousing and that type of stuff, right? And so when the word event center is attached to me, it really paints a different picture of who I am. The first guy I called when I found out there was an issue with Mr. Jones was Mr. Jones. I didn't call him, I texted him, was able to find him and text him. He was gracious enough to come over, but his comment was, when he accepted the invitation, was, I'll come over and see you, but I'm not going to change my mind. Now, Commissioner Barry, I remember one of the first subdivision planning committee meetings I was in with you, and you said, do you know your neighbors? And I said, I don't. And you had great advice. I didn't know how good it was. You said you need to get, you smiled and you said, I would recommend you get to know your neighbors. So we've hosted at least one open house where we've had the neighbors come over, and we had a great turnout. A lot of people who were worried about the what ifs was going to happen, and it wasn't because of what they saw or heard. It was what Mr. Jones was walking door to door telling people. They came and they met me, and they're not here today because they're fine. The lady who he says is not from here to this door, I've measured those distances. It's 180 feet from the edge of my building. Now, if you want to talk property lines, I've got 5 acres. You go 200 feet out from 5 acres, that's a lot of people. This lady is the first house off the edge of my parking lot. We've had great conversations. She's all behind what we're doing. We're even helping right now help establish a fence that has started to fall down we weren't aware of, and we're going to fix that fence. Listen, I've spent 30 years of my life in this city building a business and trying to be a good neighbor. I took an eyesore, something that was falling down. It was a crime trap, and I've made it better. And all we're asking to do is take, I've got 18,000 square feet. I'm asking you to take roughly 3,500 of that and be able to rent it out to the people that you just met and he just described I'm not looking to host rap parties. I'm not looking to host country dances that get wild and crazy. I'm not looking to do anything except try to turn this venue into really what's more of a cultural event center rather than what you would typically know as an event center. And that's really why I'm here. Here's one thing I do need to mention. The president of the Walnut Valley Properties Owners Association was on his way here today. I got a call from him when I made it into the building in the restroom. He actually hit a pothole, blew out a tire, broke a rim on his truck, and he was so apologetic. That's the president of the Walnut Valley Properties Owners Association, the board. And I actually had Chris, who's on vacation. He was here in August when I was here. Chris is their secretary treasurer. They were both going to come and speak on my behalf. I've met with their board. I've talked with them. I really feel like I've done everything I possibly can to be a good neighbor, and I really have one guy that's sitting in this room that thinks it's going to negatively impact him. Now, to his credit, let me tell you, I do a lot of research when I have opponents, and Jeff's a sharp guy. If you look at the pictures of his house when he bought it before and where it is now, oh my gosh, it's a beautiful home. So I can understand where a neighbor would say, listen, if I don't know what's going to go on, I'm going to oppose it. It's the big what ifs. I'm not that what if. I mean, I've done good things, and I've been here 30 years. My business is in there. If I screw up this, what I'm asking you to do today, I lose a lot more than 3,500 square feet of event space. I lose a whole lot more. The big what if is, what if I do what I think I can? What if I've done what I've already proved in the last 3 years, that I can raise property values, I can run with a tenant that is thrilled, absolutely thrilled. I can do things without causing any problems at all. And then if you want to take the biggest safety nets you have, I guess fire departments, city employees, I guess they are correct, they are right. You've got a group of city employees that rotates every 24 hours that's right beside me, that like me, and that will be I'm not going to get us into any trouble. That's what I'm trying to say. I guess that's my pitch. The 200 feet from property line made me send letters to 50 people. If we go from the building of where it happens to where people are, I would have sent out 3. So it really doesn't impact anybody. We're right on the edge of the neighborhood for sure, but we're also at the bottom edge of a West Village improvement and retail merchant society that's going on a third of the mile up. We've got Premier Gastroenterology. Traffic count, I didn't mention that. Jeff mentioned just the amount of volume of traffic. Have you guys ever looked at that area and know what the traffic count is? 9,000 cars a day go by there. If I had every night event and filled my parking lot every night, it would be 1/3 to 0.5% impact on traffic. So anyway, I guess that's what I want to say. So what questions do you all have?
I have a question.
Any questions, Commissioners? Comments?
You sent me a PDF of the distances to the
Right.
of the places. Do you have a copy of that
I
you
do.
could share with the commission?
Commissioner Stebbins, are you through with your question? I have a question after you.
You can go ahead.
Oh,
I may have another one here in a minute.
Mr. Chair, I just have some questions, clarifying questions for staff. Trying to remember the history of uses on this property. It was a church, and then printing. What else?
Sorry, the current approved uses?
Yeah, well, and past uses too.
Past use was a church and then a daycare.
Okay.
There were some other items that were floated around that never really came to fruition. A couple of years ago, this was approved for Mr. Bennett's printing company, Sir Speedy.
For Speedy and Bennett Davis Group.
Yeah.
Printing company. It was also approved to have 03 uses in the building as well.
Yeah. And dance clubs is a use that's not separately identified in our current zoning ordinance. Is that correct?
In the 03 district, you can actually have dance studios. And so that's fairly broadly defined in the zoning ordinance. I'm less concerned about the fact that these particular 3 dance studio clubs are in there than I am the fact that they're operating outside the approved hours. If they would all go home at at 5 o'clock Monday to Friday, then they would not necessarily be in violation of the 03, but they are currently operating beyond the hours of the approved POD for that property.
So dance studios, you view that as commercial, even though that's in uses in an office, is that right?
Well, a dance studio, and again, that's fairly broadly defined.
But that is allowed in office.
It's allowed in office.
Okay.
It's not a commercial
Okay,
use.
okay.
Yes.
For this particular application, this will go with the property, not the current property owner, is that correct? How does that work?
Zoning goes with the property. There have been applications in the past where have been conditioned upon a particular owner.
Okay, that's the answer to my question. And this one may seem like a odd one, and excuse me, other commissioner.
Anything else?
I'm not through. I'm not done.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So this reminds me of the Bridge Club off Indiana, which a lot of people go to. They stay out till midnight, and we've approved that in expansion. How is a Bridge Club defined in our zoning ordinance? Do we know? That's not a trick question. I wouldn't expect you. I wouldn't expect you to know that, but just curious.
No, a bridge club itself is not specifically
Okay,
defined, so you
okay.
do have to try to find uses that are
Okay.
similar in intensity
Yeah.
and activity.
You know, my thought about this, and I'm sorry Commissioner May's no longer with us. I do miss him. He applied a lot of common sense. I visited this property. I was actually looking for the firewood place because I turned up on Google when I was looking for firewood. And I went there, and the terrain as you go down, and it's a very isolated piece of property. And then I realized, oh, this is one of the zoning cases. And so it's not like you're on Asher or downtown where you're spilling out into the streets. The terrain to me says something different. I know event centers are if you're going to draw bright lines around them, this it's not Fisher file, but you have to put it in that category. But I would recommend approval of this if it's conditioned on only being with the owner of the property, not with goes with the property on sale. This is my suggestion.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to clarify for the record, the issue before the Planning Commission is not solely to allow the continued use of the property by these three dance clubs, who I'm sure are very fine people and obviously, based on what we're hearing, are not having in and of themselves a negative impact on the neighborhood. The issue before the Planning Commission goes well beyond those three dance clubs, and it is to allow for the use of this building as an event center.
Yeah, that would be my concern. That's what's going to be my question as well. When we say event center, and Commissioner's already clarified my one question, would this usage be passed on with the property or not the owner? So if it were sold, this would stay with the property, correct?
Unless it were conditioned such that it were tied to this property owner, it would go to any subsequent owner.
Because I would have to, I guess, not be in support of this and be more or less in line with what staff is saying because it's so close to the residents. You know, right across the street, I believe there's some apartments, correct? And to the other side, some houses, opposed to your reference to like Asher, a rap club, or a country western like the one off of I-30.
Right.
They're not as close to houses.
Right.
Not that they pose any different, you know.
Well, I guess the question of distance comes in for noise primarily, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's,
Noise, traffic.
well, yeah, so traffic,
Debris.
again, we've got 9,000 cars a day that pass my building. So traffic in of itself we're not going to be an impact to that. I've made tons of suggestions to Mr. Carney and his staff about we've discussed the zoning being tied to me. that was passed up by the staff. We weren't carried forward on that. I've brought up the idea, even with with Jeff back there, that I've even looked at zoning restrictions. I mean, not zoning restrictions, deed restrictions, which I'm not really I've been trying to figure out myself. How can I make everybody feel good about this and know that I'm not looking to pull? If I screw this up, I've messed up a ton of stuff. I really have. So I've looked at those things. But the distance comes down to how much of an impact noise-wise typically it's going to make. I've invited Mr. Stebbins to come by. I've actually done a video where I walked out of my building one evening when it was one of their, I forget what night it was. There was a ton of people in there. And I walked out with my phone, and I was videoing myself for 3 minutes walking my property. The neighbor across the street, the closest neighbor across the street, his garage door opening was what you'll hear on my phone. You won't hear any music or anything until I open the door to go back in, and then you can really hear it. I've got it is in a low, depressed area. It really is. It goes down the hill. The walls on my building are about 6 inches thick. It's a concrete building, concrete and steel. I can't hear the music when I'm in the back of my office by myself. I can't hear it. So if the distance is to the neighborhood's an issue, it has to be based, I guess, on noise, and there's just not a noise issue. There absolutely isn't.
What is the staff, what is the capacity, capacity of occupants would be for the building with the desired space that he's looking to use?
Mr. Bennett, did we ever determine what capacity?
We're working on that now. What I want to do is get the fire marshal to come out and tell me exactly.
Because that's a 2-lane road there. Well, one,
Yeah.
So, for traffic, I was just trying to think of that consideration as well.
Chairman Thomas, the capacity, once, if approved, the use is what sets the capacity and what they're there and the square footage and the type of building that is there. And I can't speak for, because I haven't been walked around the internal of the building, but that's what the fire marshal goes to with our building and sets that capacity. So that's what will determine that.
Commissioner Stebbins had a question.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the dance studio, because my daughters both took dance all the way through high school, and they were in dance until 9 o'clock at night. They went to the Little Rock School of Dance over off Markham. So if a dance studio is allowed and in this classification or whatever, I mean, those places are open, past 5 o'clock in the evening. Pretty common practice. But the other thing I'm glad that Mr. Bennett brought up the impact on the traffic, and I understand the neighbors' concerns, but did we not approve, I think this commission approved some event centers in Southwest Little Rock that were all over by the post office on Geyer Springs, Geyer Springs Road within the last year or two. I mean, and they were within about the same proximity to residential houses, weren't they? Residential dwellings? Do you recall?
You're referring to the one on Geyer Springs that staff recommended denial of because it was adjacent to single-family residential.
But it did pass, correct? It was approved?
It was ultimately approved by the board.
Okay. And again, I don't want to do anything that's going to disrupt the neighbors, but I've spent a lot of time visiting with Mr. Bennett about this. I think it's the highest and best use of this property. He's invested a significant amount of money to make it as good as it can possibly be, and there's obviously a need for it. I mean, these dance clubs are all, and I think it's, I think it would do well as an event center. I think because of the terrain and and it being on Shackelford Road, I don't think the noise or the traffic are going to be that big of an impact to the neighborhood, and, I'm going to support this. I mean, I think it's a nice addition to the city, and it's a nice addition in this area, so that's how I feel.
Yep, a couple of questions for staff. So this letter seems to vary the hours of operation, but that's not what we're reviewing. We're reviewing the actual application, right? Which has the 8.
Well, the issue before the commission is specifically to allow the event center, but they are proposing hours of activity for use of the property. So I think if this were approved, it would address those issues of the hours that the dance clubs are now meeting.
Okay, so I guess my questions are really trying to understand this last paragraph of staff recommendation sort of points out the hours are one thing, and the proximity to other houses. and then the utilizing unpaved areas for overflow parking with no plans to properly develop the parking area to comply with code standards. So if those things were addressed, would the staff have recommended approval, or is it sort of irrelevant? It really is the use in proximity to.
I don't, as I stated in my presentation, I think the applicant has done a good job of addressing a lot of those issues. However, at the end of the day, it's still an event center directly adjacent to single-family residential, and we are not able to support that.
Gotcha.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'm not trying to make your post-vacation cold any worse than it is, or your misery. I do have a question for staff and the chair too, since it was mentioned, that zoning can be conditioned on the ownership and not through the property. City Attorney, can I offer a substitute motion to that effect? There will be, and then I will offer a substitute motion to the effect that it be conditioned on the only on the owner of the property, which I think under parliamentary rules is allowed.
I'm going to defer to staff. That's your procedure. I'm unaware of that, but I have not served with this commission before.
Chairman Berry and the commissioners, as the staff attorney, John Overton prior, and I have discussed in the past and made known to the commission that change of an application, if it's substantial enough, cannot be heard at this if they choose to do that. That's part of, negotiations at the podium. And when we've had that discussion several times, that if it's like minor, like hours of operation, like an hour or two, that's different. But in the stipulation of the application that's before you is not tying to a specific owner, as opposed to what you're talking about, tying it to a specific owner, that's a substantial change in application.
I understand that. In light of that, I would vote for deferral so that amendment could be considered. It can move for that.
Well, aren't you assuming that he wants a deferral and he wants that?
Well, I assume he'd like to get this application passed in some form or fashion. I assume he doesn't care.
Well, I've been quiet through this, but I've driven by that several times. I used to live out in that area. When it first came up, it struck me as this is the thing, that's the perfect use for that piece of property. It's far enough away you can't hear anything. I've known Jack Murphy for 30 years. If he can stay up past 10 o'clock, I'm all for it. But the thing is pretty isolated. There are a few houses across the street, but it's across Shackelford. The couple of houses to the south are down a slope, and there's nobody behind them.
If you're cool with that, I'm ready to go with a motion to approve application.
Well, I'm ready.
Okay.
Make it.
I move for approval of this application, except that for staff's recommendation of denial.
I have one quick question.
Okay.
Sorry?
Y'all just running it to death. Am I allowed to ask him what is his proposed hours for is that within my, hi.
Hey.
What are your proposed hours for the event center?
I'd have to look. I would say that if it's Sunday through Thursday, people should be out of there by 10:30 at the latest. And I don't think we're going to really rent it that late anyway. On a Friday night and a Saturday, should we have a wedding reception or should we have some sort of something? I think it could be extended to go past then, maybe 11:30 or midnight. So. Yeah.
Last call. Anybody else? How about a motion?
I move for the approval of item, what number are we here?
B.
Item B, including all staff recommendations and comments except for that of denial.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing none. If you're in favor, raise your hand. If you're in favor of the motion. If you're opposed?
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
6-1. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Item 3. Item 3, we have one card in opposition.
Item 3, File Z8286-C, Vimy Ridge Road General Retail Store, conditional use permit, located south of 13403 Vimy Ridge Road. The property is zoned C1. Conditional use permit is requested to allow for development of this vacant 2.215 acre tract with a 10,640 square foot general merchandise retail store and associated parking. This item was on the consent agenda. Staff does recommend approval of this item, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in sections 4, 5, and 6, and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report. Staff recommends approval of the requested driveway spacing variance.
Okay, is that decision time? Would you like to defer, or would you like to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Chris Harris, and I am with Blewett Associates. I am representing the current owner of the property, Ricky Williams, and our client who is purchasing the property. The site is located on the east side of Vimy Ridge and on the north side of Valero gas station that is on the corner of Vimy Ridge and County Line Road. It is one tract consisting of approximately 2.215 acres and is currently vacant land. We are requesting a conditional use permit to allow for our client to develop a 10.640 square foot general merchandise retail store and associated parking on this site. This site is currently zoned C1, neighborhood commercial, with a convenience store with gas pumps, which are adjacent to the south side of the site. Undeveloped properties on MF6 to the southeast, a single-family neighborhood to the east, a single-family tract to the north, undeveloped property, located to the west across Vimy Ridge, and an approximately 8,000 square foot retail store located southwest of our site across Vimy Ridge. The current zoning allows for various types of retail, some of which include bookstores, clothing stores, and food stores. Our client's use will consist of these type of items, as well as other household items. Therefore, our site is consistent with the current zoning. The city traffic access and circulation requirements of section 30-43 and 31-210 requires side of the property is approximately 266 feet and does not have enough street footage to meet this requirement. Therefore, we are requesting a variance to allow our drive to be within the 150 feet. The proposed building will be block and colored metal on the front, and colored metal on the rear and sides of the building, and a single dubbing sliding door for customer access at the front of the building with a single door located on the north and south sides of the building, not for general access. The building height will be 18 feet with the HVAC units on the roof. The HVAC units will be screened from the public right-of-way and the abutting residential properties. The proposed parking lot will consist of 35 parking spaces. The dumpster area will be enclosed by privacy fence with a wood gate. We will extend the dumpster fence along the rear side of the dumpster/receiving pad to the corner of the building and raise it to 8 feet if needed to block height of the dumpster. We will landscape along the bottom of the fence with shrubs used along the edge of the parking lot. The dumpster service hours will be limited to 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. A 6-foot tall privacy fencing will be installed along the north and east sides of the property to screen the site from the residential properties. All the site lighting will be low level and directional, shielded downward and into the site, with a detention pond in the north corner of the site. Days and hours of operation are proposed to be 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. Full half-street improvements will be completed all the way to the north property line and will not be tapered, and we will install any signage required per the traffic department requirements for end-of-road designation. Our proposed plans are meeting and or exceeding the requirements provided by the city regarding half-street improvements, signage, lighting, and buffers. Any other design items will be addressed when we go through the building permit review process. We believe this proposed development is compatible with the area and will serve the community well. Approval of the conditional use permit and the drive variance will allow our client to continue with the design and development of this site for a 10,640 square foot retail store and will allow for more economic growth for the city as well as serve the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions again so far? Okay, let's hear from the opponent for a minute. Troy Lahey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Little Rock Planning Commission and Little Rock Planning staff. I'm Troy Lahey. Southwest Little Rock United for Progress voted in favor of this application. And what my concern is, there's a small stream crossing Vimy Ridge Road between this property and Big Red and the property he's talking about across the street southwest. There's already widening 4 lanes and a turn lane coming to it. He's required to widen the street on the north side of this small structure. And eventually the other side of the street will be widened. Now we have 4 lanes of traffic from the south, and will be 4 lanes of traffic from the north coming down to a 2-lane structure on that creek. That's going to be a problem. Now, eventually, the city will have to go, will have to go in and widen that structure, improve it. And you know what that means. The tax dollars, you and I will pay for it. And the way I look at it, and several other towns have done this, is that he can make those improvements, he can widen it, make it structure larger now, and we can have a safe passage there. And it sounds kind of like that if he gets this passed and all this widening takes place and we taxpayers, you and I, have to pay for putting that structure in there, that they're going to laugh and say, look at here. So we got the city to give us $100,000 on that structure. And this is not the only place in town. I was on a tour with the city of Little Rock, mayor for a day, and we run into the same problem in another part of town, and we stopped the bus and discussed it with the mayor, and he said, I'm going to look into it. And that's as far as it went, as far as I know. He might have discussed it, but I don't. And that's my pitch. I don't oppose the business as in there, but I'm opposing us building a hazard into the system out there. And I'm on a city committee, and we've got enough of these places in town where we got to spend the tax dollars on, your dollars and my dollars, to make it good. Thank you.
I drive Canis every day where 5 lanes goes to 2 and then back to 4. So.
Mr. Chair, could Public Works address that? I think they were looking at some maps.
Part of the plans provided to us, the box culvert that is on the south side there, the plans do show the box to be extended to the back of the new sidewalk. We have no records of that box being flooded, being overtopped by a storm event. Not to say that it hasn't ever occurred. We size our pipes based on based on the 25-year storm. We do receive storms bigger than that. We are at the planning commission stage. When we go to building permit, we will get to the more defined drainage calcs, the flows, the sizing, and those things. But as of now, their plan shows to extend the box culvert to the back of the new sidewalk.
Any other questions? Comment? How about a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move for the approval of item, I've lost my item again, number three, including all staff recommendations and comments.
Is there a second? Been moved and seconded approval of item 3. All in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed? Thank you. Staff has some comments regarding some information on the bylaws, so.
Commissioners, Chairman, what you have in front of you is a hard copy of what I emailed out earlier today for recommendations for consideration and vote for bylaw change. For our bylaws currently, staff has to present it at a regular agenda, and that's what we're doing. And then at the next hearing time scheduled at the Planning Commission discretion, we will have a discussion and then vote on the changes. What I wanted to do is kind of go through some of the big items on there just to explain where they come from and what we're doing for us at this time. Listed on page 2, you'll see that there are where we had struck through 2 committees, the subdivision committee and the plans committee, and they're just proposed. What that is currently by state law, if there is a public meeting being held and 2 commissioners more in that meeting would constitute that, we have to record that meeting and keep those minutes to that meeting for that, which means anything that is heard at those meetings, would be of record. In speaking with City Attorney's Office and looking at what the state law says, that committee used to, a long time ago, took vote to pass it on to the commission. They don't do that anymore. That is not a voting committee. So things discussed in that meeting, if recorded, could be also used, in that planning commission. Now that could be, so we would have to really, put more rules at that committee if we chose to keep it. And then also over time, there's not real in-depth discussion. We have it at noon, especially the subdivision committee, and we just go through the comments, and we do ask some questions, but staff's opinion, we can answer those questions through a staff level review and also provide to the commissioners to, respond to us and answer those at that same time without having that meeting. But that is up for y'all to vote at the next hearing to see what you would like to do with that. The next item was just stuff that's kind of come up in the past regarding the comment cards. We had those in our previous meeting, on timing and kind of how we present the citizen comment cards and how we're going to do those and when we're going to stop taking them. And we mentioned it was in the bylaws. Well, they're in the parliamentary procedures that's in there, but not really clearly defined. And so we're wanting to kind of, there's several comments that are kind of clear to define that, when we're going to stop taking them and tally them up and proceed with the hearing. So it's nothing that we haven't discussed, and I think it just kind of puts some bounds on that. Another item is when items are voted on. We've had a couple of times in the past year, well, actually 2 years since I've been here, that people kind of show up late to the planning commission. I know we have it, we started at 4, some people can't get off there. But there's a couple times that the person wanted to speak on a consent agenda item that has already been heard, already been voted on, and we've allowed that. And I think that once an item's been discussed and in the conversation with the city attorney's office, we don't need to discuss it in the hearing. We can discuss it in citizens communication if we chose to do so at that time. And because they do need to be heard, we want to make sure that we hear their concerns. That's part of this commission, is to hear the voice of the citizens. But we don't necessarily need to hear it in the actual hearing where we've already voted on the item. But again, this is for the commission to look at and address any comments that we have to staff. And the other item that's on that page is in regards to also, we've had a couple meetings that's been a little, has gotten out of procedure. And we don't have it that often, but we need to put something in there that really emphasizes the rebuttals, people speaking out in, the audience, and how we're going to address that. And again, that was in the parliamentary procedures, but it's not really spelled out exactly what would happen if that happens. And I think we've handled it always very, professionally and discreetly. And but again, some things that's come up, I think we need to address some of those. And the rest of it is more just kind of going through some of the administering, making sure we adhere to the laws and the codes when we start, abiding stuff that we don't have in there that's changed over time. The amendments, I think that's what we just talked about. We've talked about what would be, Chairman Berry brought it up, about a substantial change. And that's part of that negotiating at the podium. And I've actually went back and looked at past planning commissions, and there was a lot of negotiation at the podium, on the deal. But as you've heard from city attorney's office in the past, that can lead to, duress, that they've felt like they've made a concession under duress to obtain your vote. And that's the only reason why I spoke up, Chairman Rahman, in regards to that. I mean, we don't need to guide them in order to obtain my vote. This is what you need to do. And I think that's what all this boils down to as far as the substantial changes. We need to really sit down and see what that is. And that really would be the staff, the city attorney, deciding on what that substantial change is. Like I explained what that was. When you change the ownership, when one is not tied to ownership and then one is tied to ownership, that's property law. That is a substantial change, that we really need to, that's another application that needs to go through. And that's also for the applicant, and that's also for any citizens that might be in opposition, for that.
Oh, yeah. Under normal corporate law, actions taken sort of that are contrary to the bylaws of the organization are considered ineffective. Are all of the bylaws that we're governed by, is it sort of the same interpretation? If we are outside of the normal order of things based upon our bylaws, or we skip a step, is that decision, whether in favor or denying, now subject to some sort of collateral attack because we didn't do it by our own procedure, or?
Well, that's something I'll have to defer to the city attorney's office. But what I understand from what we discussed in the past and what he's stated several times is we're a government entity, so we don't necessarily adhere to what some of the corporate laws are.
Right, exactly.
And in some of the court cases that we've been in, that we go there, it's the due process really is what we're looking for, the due process, and making sure that they are heard and that we need to follow it. When we get out of that, and that's where you hear staff coming in and city attorney's office or the secretary and myself say, we need to get back in line to the due process. Then we try to rein that in. That's a good point, and that's something that if you have some of those ideas and put in there that we can discuss and put in there. I'm not suggesting that we have 20 pages, 30 pages of bylaws try to cover everything. I think these bylaws have stood very well for how many decades now, Mr. Carney? Like 80-something was the last revision. I think this is just a clarification of what we've had over this past year and a half, some things that went on that we just need to kind of, cinch stuff up a little bit, and I think they are working in general fine with what we have.
And if I could step in and address the commissioner's question, that is a very good point, and I am familiar with some of the case law in regards to commission decisions in Arkansas. To my knowledge, that's the point that's never been litigated. That's not to say that it would be a good point for a plaintiff to raise with the court if it came right down to it. I just don't think there's any word on case law currently. But your point is very valid. It's well taken.
Okay. One of the items that we have is the same thing that we talked about tonight, about the practice that we've had of deferral for 8 or less. And we believe that we need to put that in the bylaws.
It's a shell now, right?
Yeah, that is pretty much that we announce it, and then that they have that option. If they choose the deferral, it's going to be counted as one of their deferrals. Because we had several times that we've had a lot of opposition that's come there, and we also need to look not only for the applicants' due process, but also the citizens that come in due process.
And I think that's important because there were counted deferrals against them.
Yes.
For instance, the one we just had, the church.
Yeah, that would
4 or 5 deferrals.
Yeah, that would not have been against them, and they've had enough, and so. And then the last one is just we passed an ordinance to adopt the non-discrimination verbiage, Title VI. And it also says in there the city board passed it, that all boards and commission would adopt that. And so in this bylaw change, amendment, city attorney's office requested that we add that to this also, and so it is. So from this point, like I said, we can have discussions at the next meeting. You're also more than welcome to email staff particular questions you have, and because it'll probably be addressed by either planning and development or city attorney's office.
Just a quick question, Jamie. Who is the secretary of the commission that would determine what constitutes a substantial
That is
change?
the director of the planning and development. As set, I don't know if it's in the bylaw or is it in the ordinance? I think it's in the ordinance. Per ordinance, the secretary of the commission is the director of planning and development, whomever it may be.
Okay.
Anybody else? Anything? We're adjourned.